So many people our age, 20s, 30s, feel lost.
Disturbing news tonight about how...
And I get this question a lot, and honestly, the answer is...
My name is Arman,
founder and CEO of Parthean,
personal finance education company.
After that first company, I would not let another company fail for those reasons. The highs feel very high, and the lows feel earth-shatteringly low.
What is the role love plays in your life?
Interesting.
Yeah, the future as a journalist. Good research.
Thank you.
Let me bring in Nason Mahboubi from the University of Pennsylvania.
That's a great question.
In a couple of your podcasts that you've already done, you talked about as a kid, during the summers growing up, you'd visit Iran. Where did you go? What do you remember?
My family was largely in Tehran, so I would spend a lot of time there. We played a lot of badminton in the park. Do you remember that? And then do you remember those little plastic balls that you'd play soccer with?
Like, they weren't even real soccer balls, right?
It wasn't even a real soccer ball. Yeah.
Oh.
And it was so light that what people would do is they would buy two of them and then cut one of them in half and then put one of the balls inside the other one so that it wouldn't like blow out your knee. Like, that's why every Persian middle-aged man has bad knees, is because those soccer balls. And then we did this one road trip from Tehran, Isfahan, and then Shiraz. And we saw like Sivasepol, Persepolis, obviously, just like seeing the actual country with my mom, dad, brother, aunt, uncle, eating a lot of good food. Good memories. It's been years.
When was the last time you visited?
10 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe more, honestly, at this point. But yeah, probably similar to you.
Building off of that, there's a really interesting anecdote that you talked about of how you were walking in the street and you saw a bunch of like poor children. Talk to me, like, what did you see? What were they wearing? And how did it make you feel?
Like, we went and got kebab. Everyone in America thinks that every Iranian is just eating kebab like 7 days a week. But like, kebab in Iran is similar to like pizza in Italy. Like, yeah, you eat it sometimes, but like, it's not your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't remember what street we were on. Basically, I leave the restaurant, I turn left, and we're walking down this road. But then me, my mom, and my brother were up front. And I see these like two kids. One of them had a tombak and he was like playing. And the other one was like dancing and like asking for money. They were my age. I was like 7, 8, 9, something like that. It's crazy that I remember that. Like, I remember like the kid dancing. And part of me was like, okay, cool, kids dancing. Like, it didn't connect what was happening in front of me. I just saw a kid that could have been my friend in school dancing on the street. And then my mom was like, oh, Arman, you should give that kid your kebab. And I was pissed, man. I was like, why would I give this kid my kumide? You know what I mean? like that's not, like that's mine. This sounds so silly in hindsight, but like, she was like, oh, do you remember that movie Slumdog Millionaire? Like, I had just watched Slumdog Millionaire, and she was like, oh, like these kids are like those kids in that movie. And I like freaked out because that movie liked me. So I gave the kid my food. They stopped dancing and playing the tombak. They were like freaking out. They were so excited. But that hit me, man. It stuck with me. And it has become the reason I dove in deeper. Like, what is the difference between those kids and me? Why did one generation of decision making make such a stark impact in two different people's lives? How is that possible? And I mean, there's a lot of parts to that question, right? There's geopolitical issues, there's family dynamics. I think it's very difficult to find a silver bullet, but I tried. And the silver bullet that I have kind of dedicated a lot of my career to is education, finding ways to make education more high quality, more accessible, more sustainable, using technology, business, and a lot of the other modern tools at our disposal.
When I went to Iran, as much as like I'm Iranian, right?
Yeah.
I went there and I felt like an alien. When you look at yourself there, what would have happened if you grew up in Iran,
I think about that a lot. I recently had a conversation about this with one of my friends. He grew up in Iran. So he went to Danishgah Shari, one of the best, if not the best university in Iran, got his master's at Stanford, now is a very successful entrepreneur. He was basically saying like, Iranian people are entrepreneurial people. Despite all of the setbacks that the people of Iran have faced, there is an Uber in Iran. There is an
Exactly.
Amazon in
Yeah.
Iran. Iranian people don't live this like weird life that is 30 years behind. They have
Never.
100% adapted to everything that has hit them.
Fantastic food.
I can only hope that I would have been a part of that adapting. Had I grown up in Iran, I hope that I would be doing something opportunistic in that state.
That's such a good point you make, because the joke is like, oh my gosh, in Iran, like you have no internet, like how do you do anything? There's no alcohol. That's like the one thing they always say. And I'm like, look, if you literally call a phone number, you can get anything you want in like 15 minutes. I've seen like my friends there when I went. I was a little kid. I was like 13, 12 years old. And I was like, what the heck? It was like really eye-opening. I also think about the constraints. How hard is it to build like a DG Kala, which is Amazon of Iran? Like being able to pull that off with like a lockdown internet, right? Kind of building off of that. You talked about a bit of how like your life would have changed, right? If you were in Iran. And I've noticed both looking at the website for Parthian, it started off fairly broad, and it's definitely like fine-tune over time. But you yourself have gone through, at the previous startup, a difficult co-founder ordeal, right? With equity. What's up? How have you changed from that experience? And how do you think about building a team?
A lot of companies fail. I think it's something like 60% of companies fail because of co-founder issues and personnel issues more broadly, maybe. And after that first company, promised myself essentially that I would not let another company fail for those reasons. And there are always going to be personnel and interpersonal issues. That's just a part of human life. But I just think it's important to like find really good people, trust really good people, and set boundaries such that like basically like a prenup. Like if you think that it might break up, what's going to happen? I mean, at the end of the day, businesses are people, and people are really, really important. And you just need to find great people.
You've also are clearly proven that you're not like stubborn. I think a lot of founders, me myself included, on like certain things, I get really hung up about something and I'm not willing to change. But the business has changed and you have changed. Going from like a broader education platform, you called it like YouTube for education. Now it's definitely not the case. Now it's isolated on like financial education, right? I'm curious, where does that trait come from? Being able to be iterative in your life and kind of willingness to change and having a flexible mind.
I actually think I'm very stubborn, and it's like interesting that you say that. For some like kind of context, I started my first company my freshman year of college, brought it through an accelerator. It didn't work out, mostly because I was like 17 and clueless and we were bad at building a company. But also to your point, like there were co-founder issues that we just couldn't figure out. I did a couple internships at Google, and that led to me starting my second company, which was basically a marketing agency. My specific angle was that I would help companies use education as a marketing tool to gain trust and adoption and provide value to people. So I worked with a bunch of the big tech companies, or really mostly Google. Did a short stint teaching at Carnegie Mellon, and then I went back to doing the consulting full time. And for a while, I was kind of like running the consulting company and like running all these experiments and like building products, putting them out there, seeing what happens, whatever. I needed a name, so I just chose Parthian. When I began to like actually turn life into a startup, I just kept the name Parthian. So not a lot of creativity there. I am very stubborn, but I recognize that I can be wrong. I think that there's an issue with pivoting too late. And I think that there's an issue with pivoting too early. I think that some people pivot themselves into oblivion, and then other people just drive their companies off of a cliff. Every company pivots to some extent, whether that's adjusting a go-to-market strategy or adjusting a feature in a product or reprioritizing something. Like your plan is never correct. Historically found it difficult to adjust. And so the thing that I began to do, if I noticed I was basically like trying to push a stone up a hill, I would sit down and I would figure out, okay, what can be wrong here? And let's try to prove myself wrong so that we can potentially pivot. Most people, when they're thinking about startups, they're thinking about de-risking certain things, one thing at a time, but you can de-risk forever and still not get anywhere. Theoretically, I would be de-risking, but I still wouldn't be getting like major traction. I would think, okay, let's go the other way. Let's try and prove that this won't work. Why will this never work? And sometimes I would be able to make that list and I would be able to literally write a well thought out, persuasive, logical argument as to why this thing will never work. And if that can happen, can actually sleep on it and agree with this logic, then I think it's time to move on and understand what's not working so that I can fix that. But if I can't do that, then what I've done is essentially I've found, okay, here is the thing that I can't prove wrong.
It's almost scientific in an approach, in essence, the way you think about it. Because you're an engineer, right? Like in terms of your background. So it makes sense. It sounds more of like the business being able to work for you as like a founder, right? And like the emotional roller coaster around it. How are you keeping that ability to stay calm and be able to sleep on it?
So I think a lot of people's answer to that would be, oh, like I talk to people and I do that. But what I've found is that the roller coasters at a startup are very specific to the startup. And so you go to someone, you're like, hey, I'm facing this thing. And then they like try and share some advice because that's what people think you need. They don't have nearly as much information as you. You're like in this vulnerable emotional state. You just get advice from this person who's trying to be helpful. And you leave and you're like, I was supposed to be getting help from my friends and colleagues and advisors. And I'm just like so confused. So I think what's helpful is to be more proactive about it and try and make sure that that doesn't happen. For me personally, I have like my hierarchy of needs. Like my number one thing that I need is sleep. I need 8 hours of sleep. Then working out really, really helps, and meditating and writing. And like, then there's like the other stuff that is helpful and like cherries on top. But sleeping and fitness are really two things that have become incredibly helpful at allowing me to keep a level head and proactively mitigate those moments of high emotional turmoil.
The first startup you did went through an accelerator, but also you had your experience with Pear. Can you demystify the Silicon Valley accelerator scene? Y Combinator, Techstars, for you, for Pear, what actually happens? What is your experience of it as a founder?
Like accelerators really can make or break your company if you're passive about it. It's like this weird thing. Accelerators are supposed to be like, hey, we're going to help you get from 0 to 1, but you have to know what you want out of that accelerator before you go through it. And so it's really hard to be a young kid, clueless, just like, oh, I want to start a company around this idea, because you just get swept up, right? And so that's basically what happened my first time. Every accelerator has like their curriculum. One thing that I actually really like about Pear is that their accelerator does not have a curriculum. They basically just meet with you once a week and they're like, okay, here's what you need, or rather, what do you need? I just think Pear is the only accelerator that actually gets that. And they were phenomenal partners for us for that reason.
Obviously, a key character there is Pejman Nozad, one of the most prolific Iranians in Silicon Valley, if not the most.
Absolutely.
And he really like defied the odds. Tech's most unlikely VC, I think they call him. How much did you interact with him? How involved is he with that accelerator program? And what was it like interacting with him, if any?
Pejman he's like one of those guys where you meet him and you just feel like you've known him for 1,000 years because he's so genuine. Every VC says, oh, like, I'm here to help if you need. No, you're not. Like, I know you won't be here if you need me. But like Pejman says it and he means it. And he actually is able to follow through with it. And he has a track record of showing that. My first time talking to Pejman outside of pitching, I walked into the accelerator. It was a kickoff event. I asked every investor this after I asked Pejman. But Pejman was the first one that I asked. I said, hey, I want to know, why did you invest and why did you almost not invest? It's very rare for an investment decision to be like, oh yeah, we're all in, whatever. I'm sure there was debate. Why were you interested? Why were you thinking about not doing it? Right. He was like, we invested because of you. We're not sure if this idea is going to work. We don't know, but we believe that you will figure it out and we're here to help you figure it out. And that's how he makes his investment decisions. It's very people. I think like Iranians are like that.
For
right?
sure.
And I bring that to my business as well. Business, like I said before, is human beings. It's human relationships. And he has created one of the most successful pre-seed and seed funds on that idea. And I think it's awesome for people to see Persian culture in business. This is the leading edge of modern business is venture capital, especially early stage venture capital. And Pear is really redefining what that means. And Pejman and Mar are like putting their own spins on it, but Pejman's really bringing that Iranian culture to that world, and it's working from the outside. Like, I love to watch that and be a part of it.
Do you still talk to him now? And if so, like how often, what's the cadency, or is it someone mainly on his team per se?
I work mostly with other partners on the team, but I see Pejman from time to time, and every time I see him, we catch up. Like he always says, if you need anything, I'm here. I have a cell phone number, because he means it. He is there.
He talks about like back in the day when Doug Leone was a younger partner and Mike Moritz at Sequoia, like bringing them into the rug store, giving them chai, and then bringing founders in, and the whole Dropbox story, right? With Arash and Drew, showing up at their apartment. Like that's like classy. Like that's classical VC style.
100%.
You know?
Dude, you go to Pear's San Francisco office, you see Pejman's drinking chai. Like you go in and he's brought that culture and infused it into a venture capital firm. And it works because the idea of like, I found my best sheet, like that idea works in business. People like to feel like they're at home with their business partner. And like
For
our
sure.
culture has a phenomenal way of doing that.
Another really cool figure that you have in your life is Alex Lieberman from Morning Brew.
Yeah.
How did that relationship transpire, and what have you learned from him?
Yeah. So Twitter, actually, Alex tweeted, financial illiteracy is a huge problem. Who is solving this? A few people tagged me in it. And then I texted a bunch of my friends and I was like, hey, tag me in this. And so I basically just wanted to get his attention. Like he saw all that and then he followed me. I was like, okay, this person seems like worth a follow. So he followed. And when someone follows you, you can DM them. And so I DM'd him and over time, just like pinged them every once in a while. Not like in an annoying way, just like keep the DM warm. And then when it was time for me to raise money, which was like 2 or 3 months after that, I reached back out to him and I was like, hey, I am raising a pre-seed and I'd love to talk to you about it. And he was like, yeah, man, let's talk. I sent him a deck. We got on a call. And then after a couple of calls, he invested. He has been the most influential investor that I can like measure. Like he has made the most introductions. He has spent a ton of time with me. The only people I think that have spent more time with me are Pear, just cause like we were in the accelerator and we really spent like hours per week together. But Alex has been very, very hands-on, incredibly helpful in tough times and good times.
Because you talk about Pejman, talk about Alex. What do you think makes a good mentor?
A mentor has to be somebody that you can look up to. There has to be buy-in from the mentee. Humility is really important. Like nothing gets on my nerves more. Even if I'm talking to someone who's like objectively smarter than me, if they try and like rub that in my face or something, I'm just like, okay, knowing when to be a cheerleader, because everyone needs a cheerleader every once in a while, but also knowing when to deliver the tough news. And I think most people are really bad at that. Some people are really good at delivering the tough news, but they do it at the wrong time. They do it like in the wrong way. And as a mentee, I think it's your job to make that easier for them. If you notice that your mentor is trying to deliver bad news to you, you can recognize, okay, that's probably pretty hard for them to say. Why are they saying that? Even if I don't want to hear it, I don't want to let it fall on deaf ears. Let's take a listen and take the medicine.
You've been a teacher yourself your whole life, whether it's teaching kids how to code in high school, TA in college, you're literally building a startup in the edtech scene. What do people not understand about the American education system?
A lot, actually. I think that people don't actually know how school works. A few things that I've been surprised about is somewhat the amount of freedom that schools have. Like, even though there are centralized requirements for public schools, individual teachers and administrators can have a huge impact on their communities.
Thank you, boys.
A generational impact on a town can be caused by a phenomenal administrator. That's because schools have a lot of freedom. Districts have a lot of freedom on their own relative to at least what I had believed beforehand. The other thing I think is just like, and this might be controversial, I think that there's just a lot of inefficiencies. People are lowering bars for kids in school. And I think that that's a really negative thing. And again, that might be controversial. I think that a lot of people are worried about stress and anxiety and things like that. And I do think that there's merit to that, certainly. I personally don't think that the solution is to reduce expectations.
Let's say in a world, Washington Post writes an article, Arman Hezarkhani elected Secretary of Education. What are the 3 things on your agenda?
Interesting. One of the most important parts of education is discovery of what your passion is. So many people our age, 20s, 30s, feel lost. And I get this question a lot, like from friends and stuff. They're like, how did you find your passion? And honestly, the answer is luck. 100% luck. I just had parents and fell into computer science and fell into education and loved it. I totally got lucky, but we can't rely on luck. We have to create an education system that allows people, students, kids to find their passions. Like right now, the way that they allow kids to find their passions is like, they have these like websites that are like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you're like, oh, like I want to be this. Like, what the hell is that? That's not what I mean. Throw kids into a project-based course where they have to actually build a robot. Like it could be a small robot. It could be written in Python, not C. Actually give them a taste of what that career, what that life, what that practice might look like. And I think it's important that we start doing that early so that they have opportunities to try a lot of things. And this doesn't require a huge budget. All it requires is a little bit of creativity and honestly, a knowledge of what is going on in the industries that are growing and modern and changing. And it's really difficult for a curriculum developer to be tasked with, hey, you need to build curriculum that's going to last 10 years. Part of the reason why we don't have this like discoverability of a new passion is because it's really hard for that to last 10 years. It's brand new. It's changing every day. In order to do that, we would need to create more flexibility in curriculum development, retraining teachers, paying teachers to be retrained, all that stuff. The second thing, I don't think that everybody should need to go to college. And so giving students respectable outlets to actually learn trade skills. And honestly, I would consider programming a trade. You can go and you can learn how to program as a high schooler. I think post high school, you should be able to get a job as a programmer. It's ridiculous that kids are not able to learn those things and they have to get into hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt to get a job writing HTML. That's ridiculous. And the third thing I think would be like, you want to say like, oh, pay the teachers more, but I recognize there are like economic issues. A big problem is just like I said, the inefficiencies. You go into a school and you see like a bunch of brand new crap, like a bunch of brand new, like actual like toys, like 3D printers and all this stuff, but maybe they're necessary, maybe they're not, but the teachers are being paid crap. I think that there's just a lot of room for making public school economics more efficient so that teachers can get paid more.
My parents, probably like yours, they thought the best thing I got out of school was this fancy piece of paper. But I think like what they don't appreciate is, maybe they do, it could be wrong, is like the friends. Babson, like I learned a lot about business things, right? But it's solely the relationships. If you were to go back to the point you said about not everyone having to go to school and after high school, they can go into like a coding job. Do you think, however, there would be social ramifications because they won't have that kind of development per se being in a college ecosystem?
That's an interesting argument. Here's the thing. I credit my experience at Carnegie Mellon as the exclusive stepwise improvement in who I was as a person. It allowed me to develop skills that I would not have otherwise developed. What I find interesting is that so many people lived before us, before there was like university. And the argument can be made, but like there wasn't progress or as much progress before that, not comparing apples and oranges. Another thing that has happened in the past couple hundred or even dozens of years is globalization or even just like connectedness in the United States. Like moving out of the house is a coming of age moment that I think will be there regardless. And a lot of people even now go to college right next to their parents' house. And then a lot of people say, oh, I want to go like the other side of the country. And so like that happens with college. I think the same thing could and probably would happen with a career. Like, oh, I'm looking for my first job as a computer scientist. I just studied programming in high school. I'm only going to apply to jobs in New York. Why? Because of the same reason I want to go to university in New York, right? Like I think that we as human beings, we would adapt and we would figure it out.
Really powerful imagery that you provided in another article that did a profile of you is when, I believe you were in middle school. It was awesome. It was you doing your homework. And for context, your mom didn't do college in Iran, but you and her both are doing homework together at the kitchen table. What do you remember from that experience? And what have you learned from your parents generally?
My mom and dad got married in Iran and then came here. My dad was already here, but my mom moved here. This was like mid 90s. And then I have an older brother. So they had my brother and then me. My dad worked a 9 to 5, but he had a long commute. So he would get home around 7:30, and he wouldn't bring his work home to a point where I didn't even know what he really did. And later I found out that he was a massively successful mechanical and civil engineer running the largest projects in the United States. But he like literally didn't ever want to burden us with that. In hindsight, I'm like the humility that my father brought to our family, the ability to put a wall between the extreme stresses of running billions of dollars of budget and then coming home to your wife and kids and still making it home for dinner every night. I was incredibly fortunate to have that in my life. And by the way, like my dad still coached our soccer teams and like all that stuff. Like he was there when he could be there. And that was awesome. And then on the other side, my mom, she was a stay-at-home mom until we were in like middle school. In that article, basically she was like, hey, I want to go to college. And we're like, okay, why? She was like, well, I promised my dad I'd go to college when I got here. And
That's awesome.
then I had kids. And now that you guys are like at an age where like, you're not pooping your pants anymore. Like it's time for me to go back to college. She didn't know what she wanted to study even. So she went to a counselor at the local community college in Suffolk County, Long Island. The counselor was like, what do you want to learn? Why are you here? And she said, I don't know, but I'm good at math. And the counselor was like, okay, you might like accounting. She goes and studies accounting for 2 years there and then transfers to like University on Long Island. She's like the top of her class. Is working full time for one of her professors actually at a firm in Long Island and raising 2 kids. And like that story in that article, it's basically like we had this like white kitchen table and that's where me and my brother would do homework every night. I remember while we were doing homework, my mom would be between her textbook and the dinner that she was cooking. And then it was time for dinner. So we'd all move our homework aside. And by that time, me and my brother were done. So we'd eat dinner and then we would like eat our apples and then go to bed. But she would bring her homework back out and work until late. So she was a workhorse. And like I said, graduated top of her class for that reason. Now she's killing it at an accounting job on Long Island. So I have been very, very lucky to watch my parents like create the American dream in front of us. And that's been incredibly inspirational.
An interesting quote that you wrote regarding relationships. A start quote is, currently, I care a lot about it because I lost a few friends recently and lost this girlfriend. So I need to fix something before I'm the only person on earth who cares about me. End quote. When I read this to you, what do you think? I knew you were going to smile.
like-
I'm reading it and I knew you were going to smile when I looked at you.
I was in college when I wrote that, or I was being interviewed for that. So I think I was a little more edgy than I am now.
Poetic though. It's like
Very poetic.
like
Oh,
roomy,
it's-
man.
Yeah, man. I was in my fields clearly. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, what do I think about that?
This was from
I think I was-
2018.
Yeah. No, I remember where I was sitting during that interview. Like I think it's just a matter of growing up. Honestly, when you read that to me, I just think back to like when I was a younger human being going through a tough time starting my second company, and that company ended up doing well. I also ended up doing well. I'm like friends with all those people that I supposedly lost at the time. So like it worked out. I think it's interesting to think about when we sample humans. And I just think it's interesting to think of the fact that I was sampled in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, dude, it's like looking at an old photo of yourself. Like you can't
Exactly.
even imagine, you know.
Yeah.
But quotes are interesting because it's like more emotional. A photo, it's like I don't remember what I was thinking, but when I with text, there's a lot more weight to it, you know.
I agree. Especially when it's your own words.
For sure, yeah. Last few questions are: what is the role at which love plays in your life? There's romantic ones, there's family ones. When a teacher is really invested in a student to have them succeed, what is the role that you think love kind of plays in shaping you and your success today?
Yeah. I think about the counter to that, which is like hatred. Honestly, like for a while, hatred or less aggressively, like the like negative emotions. I'm trying to think of the word. You'll edit this out.
I'm not going to edit this out. This is great.
Like thinking of a word. It's just oh my God, what am I? Like I just competition, negativity, anger, right? Like all these emotions have historically been what drove me. Now, like I am dating a girl who I care a ton about. I'm very, very close with my family. I live with my brother. Like we live together. We rent an apartment in New York, and my parents live on Long Island. So we see each other a lot. I think about just the like passion, love, positive emotion pushing me forward as opposed to like the negative competition, hatred, all that that used to motivate me. And I mean, it still comes back. Like, I think like if you're a competitive person, it's probably something that will always be there. I think I just have like more tools at my disposal now.
What does it look like when they show you love? Is it like a text of like courage? Is it you and your brother playing video games? Like when you feel it and it really helps you? Or is it kebab?
Definitely kebab. No, I mean, I think like it's stability. A lot of my work and therefore a lot of my life feels like it's in flux. The highs feel very high and the lows feel earth-shatteringly low. And then I go home, I see my brother and I see my girlfriend, and they don't give a shit. They are just happy to see me. And that stability is love.
Last question. You talked about that kid that you saw in Tehran that was playing the music and dancing. Who knows how old he might be right now? Let's say you had the chance to talk to him again. What advice do you have for this like young generation of Iranians back in Iran?
I don't think they need my advice. I think they're doing better than I am. I look at Iranian people and I'm blown away. And I mean that. I think that they should give me advice. All I could say is like, just continue and continue to inspire us. And we will continue to try to live up to what you guys are doing back home such that we can spread the word.